I just relocated to Lafayette, Indiana from Minneapolis, Minnesota 3 years ago. Oh. Thanks. Thank you. I moved here from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. So my story takes place in Minneapolis and Fargo. My story started when I was 13 years old. That was the first time I was committed to a facility. I was cutting myself, and my parents had found out that I was injuring myself, and they did not know what to do. They were beside themselves. So my father went to work, found a resource, found a psychologist that specialized in care of children. That psychologist met with me, and he immediately committed me to a facility. While he was committing me, though, he did tell my parents, don't be surprised if Victoria continues this behavior of cutting herself with all the attention she receives, because children typically continue down this path to seek attention. At that time, I was completely beside myself and felt hopeless. So the rest of this, I apologize, I'm gonna read off a sheet. This is my first time telling my story in public.
Woo!
Up until a few years ago, I considered this my deepest, darkest secret and wouldn't speak to anybody about it. But due to friends and family today, I feel confident in speaking.
Yeah!
Thank you. Throughout the years, I'm 44 years old today, I was diagnosed with so many mental illness disorders that I lost count. Some days I felt like I was walking DSM manual. I'd say 5, but we know there's many iterations of it. I apologize, the next bit is going to be a bit graphic. The last times I attempted suicide were the ones that changed my life. This will be the story I go into today. While living alone in Minneapolis, Minnesota 7 years ago, I attempted to take my life twice in 1 week. My depression had been consuming me for months. I was still going to work daily, but I was miserable. No one knew what was going on in my mind. In fact, people at work even commented on whether I ever had a bad day or got mad. You are one of the happiest people I've ever met. I heard this countless times in my life. On the 4th of July, I was supposed to head to my family's cabin. I felt I could no longer go to the lake and pretend to be happy. It was at that moment I canceled my plans and decided I was going to end my life. I took every pill in my house, including antidepressants, sleeping aids, and Xanax. I didn't just take a few, I took almost full bottles. At some point in that night, I woke up and I started hallucinating and obsessing over the fact that I was still alive. I was so upset, I went to my kitchen and grabbed a butcher knife and tried to remove my left hand. I awoke later the next day. I knew I was in bad shape and at least needed stitches. So like any smart person, I called an Uber to the nearest hospital. While there, I met a doctor that decided I needed surgery they were unable to perform. The team was so sympathetic and wanted to help me. They sent me to the county hospital because there was a specialist there who could reattach the tendons in my arm. I immediately went into surgery and stayed 1 night there. I was not committed as inpatient though. Instead, they sent me home with a cocktail of pain relievers. The next days, I applied for disability through work since I could not type, and I also took the time to research mental health inpatient hospitals in my community. I found one that was a 5-minute drive from my house. Unfortunately, the thoughts of suicide and how I hurt everyone I ever loved came again. I walked to the local retail store, bought some NyQuil pills, went home, set up my room to prepare to take the painkillers and NyQuil pills. I took them slowly to ensure they would all stay down. I awoke after being out for over a day, and I knew I needed help, so I called 911. I knew this was a sign I was meant to live. The paramedics and police arrived shortly after. Once I was on the stretcher, I was immediately handcuffed and tied to the bed. I explained to what hospital I wanted to be sent. I had excellent health insurance and was fortunate enough to have the funds to cover my stay. My request was denied. I was taken to the county hospital, which was much further away. Once I arrived in the ER, I was stripped of all my clothing, placed in a bed, and tied down and handcuffed again. This only sent me spinning in my head due to the previous trauma in my life. I explained to the nurse I was not a danger to myself or others. I came here because I wanted and needed the help. I was not combative and followed all instructions given to me. I was left in the room for hours. When the nurses came back, they informed me I was being admitted as inpatient. Again, I told them I knew I needed help. Instead of being sent to a room for recovery, they put me in a wheelchair and took me to a place that resembled a jail cell. There were bars where there should have been walls and a cell door that clinked shut. In the middle was a nurse's station so they could look over all the individuals in there. Hearing all the yelling and screaming from the individuals was so scary to me, Later the next day, I was taken to the 5th floor mental health unit. I quickly learned that I was one, if not the only one in there for self-harm. In places like this, my experience has been that people are quick to tell their stories and want to know yours. At that point, I realized that no matter what, I needed to follow all directions given to me as soon as possible. I wanted help, but wanted to be in an environment that was also healthy for me. That day, I was introduced to my social worker. This would be one of the many people that I met there. The social worker went over a lot of paperwork with me and informed me I was placed on a 72-hour hold. I said to her I wanted and needed help. I felt at ease speaking with her. She informed me the next steps were to meet with a psychologist and there would be around in a few hours. I was sent back to my hotel room, back to my room. Wishful thinking. When I went to my room, I asked the nurse if I could shower for the first time in over 3 days. She agreed, but informed me that I could not shower alone. The place didn't have showers in your room, so she took me to an area with individual showers and stood at the door watching me. I wanted to cry, but I refused. When I went back to my review room, I reviewed the paperwork given to me. Most of it was about insurance. One document was the patient's bills of rights. I read through this document and came across a line about the right to be transferred to a facility that offered same or better resources. The hospital I researched had that type of care. Mind you, my job is reading regulations as they apply to security products, so I definitely understood what I was reading. When I met with the psychologist, we discussed why I was there and what I'd been diagnosed with. He was not a doctor I felt at all comfortable talking to, but I knew I had to do it. At the end of the meeting, I discussed the patient's bill of rights, which I had read. I thought he would say that he would at least look into this. He did not, and immediately denied my request. I know that it could be rejected by the other hospital if I requested the transfer, but knowing it was dismissed before researching or discussing it with anyone else was extremely defeating. In the following days, I attended group and individual sessions assigned to me. I got up earlier than everyone else. I became social with other individuals there. I thought I was being a model patient. I wanted help and wanted to make the best out of the facility. I was one of the only people not allowed to attend gym or touch sharp objects in art class. So I took up coloring, which I still do today. I met with my psychologist again and asked why I was denied for review for transfer. He did not answer me, but then immediately informed me I was held for an additional 72 hours. I was in shock. I explained all the work I'd done and wanted treatment. I wanted to leave and check myself into another hospital that I was more comfortable in. This was not an option. I continued to do everything that was requested, and in the end, I stayed for 10 days. The day I was released, I was informed that I had to do 30 days of partial hospitalization. This would be Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. If I failed to attend, I was informed that I'd be in trouble with the courts. Yes, my treatment would continue in that same hospital. In the following 30 days, I knew I needed to focus on getting better. I was diagnosed with a mental illness I was not familiar with in the hospital. So I took the time to research and read everything I could about diagnoses. I could not see how the psychologist came to this. I could not see how I had the symptoms of this disorder. One day in group, we shared our diagnoses, and 8 out of the 10 of us had the same disorder. I thought this was interesting that so many people were diagnosed with this. I also learned in group that I was the only one on the 5th floor. Most people were on the 2nd or 3rd floor due to harm. The leader informed me the 5th floor was typically reserved for individuals who were a danger to society, which was precisely what I thought. My question was, how did I get assigned there? Nobody could answer that for me. I came in every day on time, participated in group. The partial hospitalization was a lot more therapeutic for me. I graduated with a wonderful certificate at the end of the 30 days. That is also when I learned that my Social Security disability was approved. The social worker had applied for my behalf in the hospital. I immediately denied it. I knew I could return to my job as a financial securities wholesaler. I would not sit back and let this take my life anymore. Some weeks after I was released, I was running around a lake in Minneapolis, still coming to terms with everything that happened to me. I'd hoped someday I'd meet somebody who knew me in the hospital that would be able to talk to me about this. Well, I could not believe my eyes when I saw my social worker walking my way. I stopped and said hi to her, and I said, I know this is probably weird, but would you meet me sometime to go through some things that have been on my mind during that state? She surprised me and said, I have time right now. We walked to a bench, sat down, and my first question, why was my stay continually kept on being continued? She said the doctor thought I was being combative when I requested a transfer, even though she advocated on my behalf. Also, the county hospital is a teaching hospital, so I did not necessarily meet with the doctor who was deciding my fate. Honestly, answering this question alone made me feel so much better. I wished her well and was on my way. Fast forward 5 years, I found a therapist here in Lafayette who's changed my life in more positive ways. I've been seeing her for a year and a half, and when I told her all my different diagnoses, she wrote them down. When our 1-year anniversary came, she gave me my official diagnoses: major depressive disorder, anxiety, and trauma. Trauma is one I'd never thought of. Looking back at life, this makes sense. I see her every 2 weeks and my med doctor every 3 months. If things get tough, I have a safety plan in place. My husband also took the time to attend sessions with me to meet my therapist and learn more about my safety plan. For the past 7 years, I worked in a manager in government relations for a nonprofit health insurance company. I've been married 4 months to the day to the love of my life, Steve.
Steve!
Steve has given me the greatest gift ever, the ability to feel safe. He has become a strong advocate for mental health, and I could not be prouder to be his wife. I have a bonus daughter who's 23 years old, and she's also the reason we relocated here. I still think every day almost about what I did 7 years ago. It makes me sad, and other days it makes me think about all of the work I've put in to choosing my life. I can't imagine going back there now, so I have the right people in my life to support me. I have a great group of friends, including Don Baldwin, family, and a strong support system. To everyone who is struggling with mental health, I ask you to please seek help. I am one of the lucky ones to survive suicide attempts. As you can see here, Lafayette has many resources in the community. Please use them. If you love someone who's struggling with mental health, show them love and support. Support could be as simple as, I'm checking in, let me help you find somebody to talk to. It can make a world of difference. I will leave you with the quote that I love. The author is unknown. To anyone dealing with mental illness, you are one badass, because nothing's more terrifying than battling your own mind every day.
Yeah!
Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I appreciate it. I got through it without passing out or throwing up, so that's a win.
Woo!